Chapter 906. The mighty sky warship had been destroyed. Luckily, the teleportation talisman was still intact. Yang Tian and Ting Ling walked out from the talisman array. In front of them was a pile of rubble. There were runes carved all over the rubble. It was clear that they were the materials used to construct the mighty sky warship. Pung! Ting Ling raised his hand and knocked away the rubble in front of him, revealing a path. After they walked out of the rubble, what appeared before Yang Tian and the others was a very strange scene. In the sky, there were colorful clouds in the shape of a funnel. Below them was a pillar-shaped platform. They had no idea what it was used for. In the Divine Dominion, these pillar-shaped platforms were known as the Heavenly Pillars. Between the Heavenly Pillars, there were beautiful, milky white palaces evenly distributed. In the sky, there was also a giant star that provided light and heat to this world. This was the tie-in in the Divine Dominion. When Yang Tian and the others arrived, the artificial star had just reached the center of the sky. Around them, as far as they could see, there were colorful lights. Ting Ling had caused quite a commotion. In less than a minute, 3 young women with white wings flew over and landed about 10 meters away from Yang Tian and the others. After entering the Divine Dominion, Ting Ling could see the quintessence symbol on his forehead. The 3 young women with wings were the most numerous God's servants in the Divine Dominion. Naturally, they would recognize the quintessence symbol on the forehead of the gods. Seeing that they were gods from the outside world that had entered the Divine Dominion, the 3 of them bowed to Yang Tian, and Ting Ling Qin Fei was probably afraid that Yang Tian would be worried, so she did not tell Yang Tian about her experience in the Divine Dominion. After coming to the Divine Dominion, Yang Tian could not wait to see Qin Fei. The 3 god servants stood up and made a gesture of invitation to Yang Tian, and Ting Ling Yang Tian raised his hand to one of the god servants and pulled her closer. "Where's the god, known as Guanyin?" Yang Tian looked into the eyes of the god servant and asked with anticipation. Yang Tian had heard from Qin Fei that her name in the Divine Dominion was Guanyin. To Yang Tian and Qin Fei, it was a strange name. Guanyin, the divine servant, was confused for a moment before he shook his head and said, "Our memories were erased not long ago. We don't remember." Yang Tian furrowed his brows. Seeing Yang Tian's unhappy expression, the other divine servant said, "This is the rule of the divine domain. We are the lowest level divine servants. Every once in a while, our memories will be erased. If you want to inquire about another god, you can ask the other gods after you have confirmed your god level." Yang Tian turned his head and looked at Ting Ling. Ting Ling nodded at Yang Tian. Under the guidance of the 3 divine servants, Yang Tian and Ting Ling arrived in front of a large hall. There was a high platform in front of the hall, and on top of it was a large piece of multicolored crystal with an irregular shape. Before Yang Tian and Ting Ling arrived, the area around the stage was already filled with people. Yang Tian glanced at them and found that most of them had a divine spark imprint between their eyebrows. The imprints were all different and had all kinds of shapes and colors. "The 2 of you, this is a divine stepstone. Inject your energy into this divine stepstone, and it will be able to determine your god level. The divine domain is a special place. It doesn't reject any living being with a divine spark. As for the god level, it determines the treatment a god receives in the divine domain." A young woman with a blue triangular imprint between her eyebrows walked in front of Yang Tian and Ting Ling and explained. After the young woman finished speaking, Yang Tian gestured for Ting Ling to go first, indicating for Ting Ling to go first. Ting Ling nodded and walked up the white jade steps to the divine stepstone. He slowly raised his right hand and placed his palm on the divine stepstone. At this time, the surrounding gods opened their eyes wide and watched curiously. When Ting Ling injected his energy into the divine stepstone, the divine stepstone slowly lit up with multicolored light and shot a multicolored pillar of light into the sky. The pillar of light rose into the sky, and 3 large runes appeared on it. Low middle tier. Even without the strange program's translation, Yang Tian recognized these 3 runes. Ting Ling also recognized them. Being evaluated as a low-middle tier god, Tingling was very happy. He walked briskly back to Yang Tian and smiled at Yang Tian. Yang Tian, it's your turn now. Yang Tian nodded, but didn't go up the stage. Instead, he looked at the female god in front of him and asked, there used to be a female god called Guanyin. Where is she now? You want to see her? The female god with the blue triangular imprint between her eyebrows asked curiously. Yang Tian nodded. The female god smiled and said she was a fake god. She courted death and lost her divine spark. I heard that she was sent to the divine tomb. What? The moment the female deity finished speaking, Yang Tian opened his eyes wide. The gaze he used to look at the female deity turned cold as he said in a deep voice. The female god was startled by Yang Tian's gaze and quickly retreated. When she was about 5 meters away from Yang Tian, she stopped. But she didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, Yang Tian would appear in front of her with his face almost touching hers. This was the first time a man was so close to her. She could clearly feel Yang Tian's hot breath on her face. She couldn't help but blush. But when she saw Yang Tian's cold gaze, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine, as if she was doused with cold water. Divine tomb, what kind of place is this? Yang Tian grabbed the female deity's neck and asked coldly when the female deity was about to escape in shock. The female god's neck was gripped by Yang Tian, so she couldn't speak. A god not far away answered for her, Divine tomb, it's the tomb of a god. There's no return. Yang Tian let go of the female god after getting the answer. At this time, Yang Tian remembered that when he contacted Qin Fei before, whenever he talked about Qin Fei's situation in the divine domain, Qin Fei would always be hesitant and avoid talking about it. Yang Tian believed that Qin Fei was still alive. Otherwise, she wouldn't have contacted him. But whether the environment she was living in was as good as she said, he couldn't be sure. Who hurt her? After Yang Tian recovered from his shock, he glanced at the surrounding gods and asked coldly. The gods who came here didn't have a high status in the divine domain. Otherwise, they wouldn't be running errands like this. Those middle and high-level gods didn't pay much attention to the living beings who just came to the divine domain. In fact, in Yang Tian's eyes, the gods in the divine domain were just a title. Compared to the cultivators outside the divine domain, they were just more powerful. Under Yang Tian's cold gaze, no one answered. Yang Tian was about to make a move when Tingling stepped forward and pulled Yang Tian's arm. We just came here. Let's not cause trouble. There are still many things to do. Yang Tian sneered. This matter is too important to me. I have to get to the bottom of it immediately. Chapter 907. Yang Tian, Tingling, and all the other deities and divine servants did not notice that the little blue dragon was staring at the god stepstone on the platform with glowing eyes. Dragons were born with a strong desire to possess beautiful stones and treasures. The little blue dragon really wanted to swallow the stone. However, its rationality told it that this was not the time to snatch the stone away. Under Yang Tian's cold question, the deities chose to remain silent. After a while, just as Yang Tian was about to lose his temper again, a colorful light shot down from the sky. 12 beautiful women flapped their wings and slowly descended. The air was filled with a unique fragrance. When the 12 beautiful divine servants appeared on the high platform, a young man with an S-shaped purple mark on his forehead suddenly appeared on the high platform. This person wore a white robe as smooth as jade, and his body emitted a colorful halo. As soon as he arrived, the surrounding space was filled with an invisible pressure. Greetings, Lord Deity King. Seeing this person, the surrounding deities bowed in unison. The person who came was actually the Deity King. Who was it that was so noisy just now? You've disturbed the peace of the deity realm. The Deity King glanced at Yang Tian, then closed his eyes and said indifferently. When the Deity King asked this question, everyone's eyes were fixed on Yang Tian, but no one answered. The hierarchy in the deity realm was very strict. No one wanted to offend the Deity King, but at the same time, no one wanted to offend Yang Tian. This was because the strength Yang Tian had just displayed was simply too powerful. If the god stepstone rated him as a high-level deity, Then if Yang Tian wanted to pursue the matter in the future, they would have to bear the consequences. So it's you. The deity king suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Yang Tian coldly. Can't people speak loudly in the deity realm? Yang Tian smiled and said, Impudent. The deity king waved his long sleeves, and an invisible pressure enveloped Yang Tian. Yang Tian did not move. Instead, he maintained a smile on his face. When the spatial power came into contact with the harmonizing power emanating from Yang Tian's body, it instantly disintegrated. Seeing Yang Tian not move, the God King's eyes twitched. Although his actions just now seemed casual, in reality, it was an attack method that he was very proud of. If it had been a low-tier god, they would have been crushed by the spatial energy in an instant. This kind of attack that used spatial energy was supposed to be layered on top of one another, continuous and continuous. Unexpectedly, before it could truly form its power, it disappeared into nothingness. Good move. After neutralizing God King's attack, Yang Tian nodded and praised him. He copied God King and waved his hand. Under Yang Tian's will, the powerful harmonizing force surged out of the energy world and crushed toward the God King. This was also an invisible attack. He borrowed the method that God King used just now. Layer after layer, it was like a tidal wave. Facing Yang Tian's attack, the S mark on God King's forehead suddenly glowed with a purple light. He then raised his hand and pointed at it. A spot of purple light appeared at the tip of God King's finger. It then exploded and formed a purple screen of light. Under the impact of the harmonizing power, the purple screen of light began to ripple, and its color became lighter and lighter. At this moment, the expression on the God King's face was no longer as indifferent as before. His brows were tightly knitted together as he gritted his teeth. His long blue hair and white robes fluttered even though there was no wind, producing flapping sounds. You can block it, Yang Tian said in surprise when he saw that the purple screen of light was still holding on and did not disappear. Then, a blue light flashed in his hand, and a blue longsword appeared. Stop! Suddenly, a cold shout came from the sky. At the same time, an overbearing force was coming toward Yang Tian. Yang Tian had no choice but to pull Tingling to the side. Boom! There was a loud explosion. Where Yang Tian was standing before, a crater with a diameter of around 10 meters and a depth of 3 meters appeared. Yang Tian dodged. The harmonizing power could no longer be maintained. God King on the stage finally let out a sigh of relief. The one who attacked Yang Tian was a man in a black robe. His head was covered by a black cloak, so no one could see his face. The man in the black robe floated in the sky. The space around him kept on rippling, making it impossible to tell how far away he was. It felt like he was dozens of meters away, but at the same time, it felt like he was so far away that no one could tell how far away he was. The man in the black robe's voice was like an electronic synthesizer. It was stiff and emotionless. He looked at Yang Tian and said, Since you are new to the Divine Dominion and don't know the rules, I will let you go this time. In the Divine Dominion, weapons are not allowed. Otherwise, your quintessence will be stripped and you will be sent to the tomb of the gods. As soon as the man in the black robe finished speaking, the strange program said in Yang Tian's mind, Yang Tian, this man in the black robe is not as simple as you think. I feel that he is not a real life form. Instead, he is a machine driven by rune energy. All of you disperse. The Divine Dominion has its own rules. Do what you need to do. After saying that, the man in the black robe waved his hand. His figure moved and disappeared. Yang Tian put away his blue saber. His figure moved, and he appeared in front of a deity with a red triangle between his eyebrows. He grabbed this deity's collar and said coldly, You have not answered my question. I dare not say. This deity was even more timid than the female deity. He glanced at the stage, gritted his teeth, and stammered. Now, Yang Tian understood everything. This God King on the stage was obviously related to Qin phase matter. Letting go of the guy in his hand, Yang Tian turned around. He saw the God King with the S-shaped mark between his eyebrows sneer at him. His figure flashed and disappeared. As soon as this god-king left, the other deities also scattered and fled. In the blink of an eye, there was no one left. Tui. Yang Tian spat on the ground and said unhappily, "What the hell is this place? It's so uncomfortable." Seeing that there was no one around, the little blue dragon's eyes turned. It jumped from Yang Tian's shoulder and transformed into a giant dragon. It flew onto the stage and swallowed the colorful god step stone. Seeing this, Yang Tian and Ting Ling's eyes widened in shock. This little blue dragon was too lawless. Rumble. Without the god step stone, the stage began to shake violently. "You dare to destroy the god step stone? Die." Suddenly, a harsh voice came from the sky. A giant hand came down and grabbed at the little blue dragon. The little blue dragon raised its head, opened its mouth, and spat out golden dragon flames at the giant hand. The dragon flames expanded and formed a giant golden cloud of fire above the little blue dragon's head. However, this giant hand was not affected by the dragon flames at all. It passed through the dragon flames and grabbed at the little blue dragon. In shock, the little blue dragon quickly shrunk its body, wanting to escape from the palm. However, the space around it began to compress infinitely, causing the little blue dragon's movements to become extremely slow. "You want to hurt Xiaolong? You're the one who has a death wish." Yang Tian shouted coldly. He took out the blue battle sword again and slashed at the wrist that was barely visible. Chapter 908. There was a muffled sound. The gigantic palm was cut by the sword chi and was cut off. The sword chi that was unleashed by the modified blue blade was pure harmonizing power. Based on the calculations of the strange program, any other power will be disintegrated by the harmonizing power. The gigantic hand was formed by the power of the runes. It wanted to grab the little blue dragon, but it was cut off by Yang Tian and disintegrated in the air. After the gigantic hand disappeared, a man in a black robe appeared in the sky. He uttered the word, "Punish," and disappeared in a flash. Rumble. Suddenly, the clouds in the sky suddenly changed. Thick, dark clouds appeared. Lightning flashed within the clouds, and there was a muffled sound of thunder. A moment later, the clouds began to spin rapidly, forming a gigantic vortex. As soon as the vortex was formed, it exerted a powerful suction force on Yang Tian. But strangely, other objects were not affected by the vortex. "You dare to use weapons in the divine dominion? Die." Suddenly, there was a thunderous voice from the vortex. Then a thick bolt of lightning struck down on Yang Tian. When the powerful electric current reached the top of Yang Tian's head, it suddenly separated and formed an electric net. It looked like the roots of a tree that was trying to hug Yang Tian. Boom! There was a loud noise. After the electric net covered Yang Tian, it suddenly exploded, and there was a bright light. The loud explosion resounded throughout the entire divine dominion. Such a huge commotion had alerted some of the gods that were in closed-door training. They all appeared and looked at the divine punishment that had not appeared in the divine dominion for a very long time. This was the highest level of punishment in the divine dominion. Not only would it destroy the physical body, but it would also destroy the soul. Once the divine punishment was unleashed, it would not stop until one was dead. After the bright light, the vortex was still there. Not only that, it was still growing, and the speed at which it spun was increasing. That meant that the attack just now did not kill Yang Tian. Yang Tian appeared a few miles away from where he was before. He looked up at the sky. No matter where he moved, when he raised his head to look at the clouds, the center of the vortex in the sky was always facing him. In this world, there was no such thing as heavenly punishment. Whether it was in the universe, the star ocean, or other worlds, the survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle among the countless creatures. That was the real rule of the game. Strength was sinless, even if it meant slaughtering and destroying the entire world. The punishment of the divine realm was nothing more than a creation of the living beings themselves. As long as it wasn't created by God, it could be broken. The rune information captured by the strange program also showed that the vortex cloud in the sky was formed by the power of runes. Who is so bold as to trigger the divine punishment? It's a newcomer. Previously, I warned him not to use weapons in God's domain. In the end, that fellow refused to listen and even dared to use his weapon to attack divine punishment. No one has ever been able to survive a god's punishment. I actually hope to be able to break the divine punishment. There are too many rules in the divine realm. It's truly too depressing. Be careful with your words. Don't be punished. Faced with the vortex cloud that was getting bigger and bigger, Yang Tian raised the blue saber in his hand. Whoosh! When the next electric current struck, Yang Tian slashed at the vortex cloud. The electric current released by the vortex cloud seemed to be electricity, but in fact, it was an ingenious mixture of many types of energy that possessed extremely powerful destructive attributes. Talisman arrays could do this, but it was extremely difficult for a cultivator to possess so many types of elemental energy. Therefore, under the attack of the divine punishment, it was very difficult for the punished living beings to escape. However, it was different for Yang Tian. After obtaining the harmonizing force, Yang Tian was already close to being invincible. In a battle of equal strength, the harmonizing force had an absolute advantage. What Yang Tian lacked now was quantity, no matter what type of energy it was. As long as it was absorbed by the harmonizing force and strengthened, he would become a truly invincible existence. The saber chi formed by the harmonizing force slashed through space and split the vortex cloud into two. The vortex cloud was a whole, and it was in a state of rapid rotation. If it was split apart, even for a split second, it would cause chaos. Boom! There was another loud bang. This time, it was not the powerful electric current that struck down from the vortex cloud. Instead, it was the sudden chaos that formed a powerful storm that quickly crashed down from the sky. At the sight of this, the deities below the clouds all fled in different directions. A moment later, the dark cloud formed by the mixture of various types of energy finally crashed onto the ground. Rumble, the entire divine realm began to shake. The energy shields outside the palaces that were hit by the dark cloud were instantly shattered. The palaces were shattered into pieces, and the divine servants that could not escape in time were instantly torn apart. There was also the tall heavenly pillar. Wherever the mist formed by the dark cloud passed, it would break apart and shatter into pieces. To the divine realm, this was no doubt an apocalyptic scene. Perhaps even the designer of the divine punishment talisman array did not expect such a powerful destructive force. The destruction lasted for more than 10 minutes before it finally stopped. The area of destruction covered by the dark cloud had a diameter of dozens of kilometers. The palaces and the tall heavenly pillars that were built within this area were all destroyed. All that was left was a large area of ruins. Yang Tian held the blue saber in his hand as he stood on top of a tall heavenly pillar, looking at all of this with an expressionless face. Behind him, the huge little blue dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it let out a deep roar that was clearly heard by every god. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a gust of wind behind Yang Tian as a black figure appeared. Yang Tian, I have just received an order. As long as I can kill you, I can become the ruler of the divine realm. Ting Ling said with a smile as he looked at Yang Tian's back. Why didn't I hear that? Yang Tian asked curiously as he turned around and looked at the smiling Ting Ling. Ting Ling said, It's a divine stepstone. As long as you input energy into the divine stepstone, it will be recorded and you will be considered God. Whether it is the energy in our body or our thoughts, they will all be monitored by the divine realm. With that said, Ting Ling complained, Yang Tian, did you already know? Yang Tian shook his head. How would I know? If I knew, I would have stopped you. Ting Ling sighed helplessly. Then what we do now? I don't want to be controlled. Yang Tian said proudly. It's simple. We just have to destroy the central talisman array of the divine realm. With that said, Yang Tian turned around and looked at the little blue dragon. Xiaolong, did you sense it? The little blue dragon looked into the distance and nodded. The swirling clouds had been destroyed by Yang Tian, but the divine punishment did not disappear. Next, Yang Tian would be attacked by many gods. Becoming the ruler of the divine realm was a temptation that none of the gods could resist. Chapter 909. The little blue dragon's body once again enlarged into a giant dragon that was more than 100 meters long. Yang Tian wore the giant god armor and transformed into a giant that was more than 10 meters tall. He stood on the little blue dragon's back with a blue saber in his hand. Roar! After letting out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth, the little blue dragon swung its tail and quickly flew forward. Rumble! In the sky, there was the sound of thunder again. Clouds once again gathered. Tai-yin, which was hanging in the sky, suddenly became much dimmer. This was because the formation of the divine retribution had taken away part of its energy. It would take some time for the swirling clouds to form. In order to keep Yang Tian here and not cause more damage to the divine dominion, the divinities in the divine dominion would have to take action. However, how many divinities would be willing to die for a powerful fighter that could destroy the clouds of doom? The little blue dragon had already sensed the presence of a dragon in the divine dominion and was quickly flying in that direction. As it was moving, there was a flash of light as hundreds of divinities surrounded it. These divinities did not say anything. As soon as they came, they began to attack Yang Tian. Hundreds of visible and invisible energy blasted toward Yang Tian. Yang Tian narrowed his eyes. He kicked off the little blue dragon's back and quickly spun in the air. The blue saber in his hand unleashed hundreds of saber auras. There was a series of puff, puff, puff. Most of the energy was dispersed by Yang Tian's saber auras. Only a small portion struck the little blue dragon. Strangely, when these energies came into contact with the little blue dragon's body, they all disappeared. It was as if the little blue dragon's body had absorbed them. It was the divine stepstone. Yang Tian immediately understood. After the little blue dragon swallowed the god stepstone, it actually developed such an abnormal ability. Yang Tian thought that the little blue dragon swallowed the god stepstone because it looked good, but he didn't know that after the little blue dragon swallowed the god stepstone, it directly digested it. Other divine dragons could not consume god stepstones because they did not have rune energy in their bodies. The little blue dragon's body had fused with it, and it had the ability to assimilate rune energy. The god stepstone was actually an exquisite combination of various rune energies. Not only was it beautiful, but it also had great benefits for the little blue dragon. No wonder the little blue dragon couldn't help but swallow it when it saw it. Of course, the so-called gods that were besieging Yang Tian and the little blue dragon were not very powerful. In the divine dominion, they could only be considered as mid-level gods. Only these people would risk their lives like this, because in this world, if they wanted to obtain more resources, they would have to risk their lives. As for whether they could kill Yang Tian, they had no confidence at all. They only hoped that after Yang Tian was dealt with by the divine punishment, they would have a chance to be promoted. The little blue dragon was very fast. Like a bolt of green lightning, it broke through the encirclement of hundreds of gods in an instant and flew into the distance. After a while, more than half of the gods that surrounded Yang Tian and the little blue dragon fell from the sky. Before they hit the ground, they turned into dust and were blown away by the wind. Only a few lucky fellows managed to escape the calamity. Yang Tian's harmonizing power was really too terrifying. No matter what kind of energy these gods cultivated, it would be disintegrated by the harmonizing power. It was the same for their bodies in the sky. The black clouds formed a whirlpool again. At this time, the strange program reminded Yang Tian, the divine punishment has changed the energy attribute. The divine punishment was formed by a talisman array. It could actually automatically change the attack attribute. In the path of talismans, this was undoubtedly an extremely difficult but miraculous creation. Yang Tian sneered. Even if the energy attribute changed, it would not be much of a threat to him. Could that talisman array be able to create energy with the same attribute as the harmonizing power? The little blue dragon flew extremely fast. In almost the blink of an eye, it flew dozens of kilometers. However, the black whirlpool in the sky was still above their heads. Yang Tian jumped up from the little blue dragon again and raised the giant blue blade in his hand. From the blade, tens of thousands of invisible blade auras burst out at the same time. Under the control of Yang Tian's mind, the tens of thousands of blade auras condensed together and rushed into the center of the whirlpool. Wherever the blade auras passed, a huge hole was formed. Before the attack energy gathered in the center could finish condensing, it was scattered by Yang Tian's harmonizing power. At this time, the little blue dragon suddenly swooped down. Below them was a huge palace. In the vision of Yang Tian and the little blue dragon, the palace was getting bigger and bigger. However, the little blue dragon did not seem to have any intention of stopping and directly crashed into it. In the senses of the little blue dragon, the dragon's aura was getting thicker and thicker. Boom! Just as the little blue dragon was about to crash into the palace, the roof of the palace suddenly exploded and a huge black dragon had appeared. Boom! It was a loud noise. The little blue dragon and the black dragon crashed into each other. The black dragon's strength was terrifyingly powerful. It was as if the little blue dragon had crashed into a solid wall, and its huge body was bounced back. Of course, the black dragon was not much better off after being hit by the little blue dragon. Its huge black dragon head was also bounced back. With a boom, the huge palace broke open, revealing the black dragon's huge body. Roar! After the little blue dragon stabilized its body in the air, it let out an angry roar at the black dragon below. Its eyes were filled with burning hatred. That was because this black dragon was the black dragon that destroyed the 12 dragon eggs. The black dragon looked at the little blue dragon. Its eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Under the gaze of the little blue dragon, it quickly rose from the ruins of the palace and rushed into the air. It was at the same height as the little blue dragon. The black dragon's body was also more than 100 meters long. The aura that it was emitting was not much weaker than the dragon ancestor. There are runes on the black dragon scales. Suddenly, the voice of the strange program rang in Yang Tian's mind. Yang Tian focused his eyes and looked at the black dragon. The black dragon's body was instantly magnified in his vision. Yang Tian finally saw that the black dragon's scales were full of fine runes. Yang Tian had seen runes carved on the bodies of exotic beasts before. Back when he was training at the Superstar Academy, Yang Tian had encountered such creatures. The runes on the black dragon's body were even more exquisite. When the runes on its body were activated, they did not emit any strong rune energy waves. Xiaolong, this guy's body is full of runes. You have to be careful. Yang Tian, who was floating in the air, immediately reminded the little blue dragon. The black dragon had come out. Its master should have also appeared. Yang Tian lowered his head and scanned the ruins of the palace. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he dodged to the side. An invisible energy swept past where Yang Tian was just a moment ago. Chapter 9-10. After Yang Tian dodged, he stood still in the air. He did not discover where his attacker was. It was time. Yang Tian suddenly understood. When the person who attacked him appeared, it did not cause any ripples in the spatial energy. Then it could only be time. It was only when it was not within this time period that he did not notice. Roar! The little blue dragon at the side, after a moment of silent confrontation with the black dragon, finally could not help but roar and pounce toward the black dragon. The two huge dragons quickly tangled together and toward each other. Yang Tian took a look. The little blue dragon was actually stronger than a black dragon. The black dragon could only rely on the talisman formation on its body to fight against the little blue dragon. It could not last for long. Even if the talisman formation was engraved on the body, the power obtained was also an external force. It could not last for long. Suddenly, Yang Tian narrowed his eyes. The little blue dragon and the black dragon suddenly disappeared from his sight. The mind power that was released outside of his body began to be consumed rapidly. The reason why this happened was because the flow of time around him had sped up. Yang Tian felt that it had sped up by at least tens of thousands of times. Moreover, the flow of time was increasing exponentially. This was a kind of domain. Yang Tian was currently surrounded by this domain. If he did not break this domain, Yang Tian could only be trapped in this domain forever until the energy in his body was exhausted and until he died. To Yang Tian, perhaps millions of years had passed, but outside, it might only be a few minutes. Yang Tian sneered and waved his sword. The sword chi formed by harmonizing energy instantly cut through the domain formed by time energy. A white figure appeared before Yang Tian's eyes. It was a woman. She looked exactly like Ting Ling. Although her appearance was the same as Ting Ling, her temperament was completely different. Ting Ling seemed a little demonic, but the woman in front of him seemed incomparably holy. Zhong Ling. When Yang Tian saw this woman, he immediately guessed who she was. Zhong Ling was very surprised that Yang Tian could easily break through her time domain. At this moment, she looked at Yang Tian expressionlessly. Although her expression was calm, her heart was in turmoil. Why? Because this situation was far too different from what she had predicted. Zhong Ling, I've long heard of your great name. I didn't expect to finally meet you. Yang Tian looked at Zhong Ling's beautiful face and said with a smile, You are Yang Tian? The corners of Zhong Ling's brows twitched as she said indifferently. There were too many meanings behind these words. You know me? Yang Tian was astonished. Countless thoughts appeared in his mind, but he still asked with a smile. Zhong Ling said, Before Yang Tian was born, I already knew of his existence. You still haven't answered me. Who are you? Zhong Ling's words resolved many of the doubts in Yang Tian's heart. For example, why did the black dragon want to destroy the dragon egg and kill the little blue dragon? His goal was to prevent Yang Tian from becoming stronger. Yang Tian, who had become stronger, was Zhong Ling's ultimate enemy. Yang Tian could imagine what would have happened if he had not met the little blue dragon. He might have become a martial artist, but in the end, he would have lost Qin Fei and would not have been able to see the world outside of Earth. Unfortunately, Zhong Ling's plan had gone awry. Yang Tian had appeared in front of her, and he was even stronger than she had expected. Seeing the confusion in Zhong Ling's eyes, Yang Tian said with a smile, Of course I'm Yang Tian. You've mastered the rules of time energy, but don't you know that time is irreversible? The past exists, but the future cannot be calculated. You don't have to teach me that. Zhong Ling said coldly. In this world, no one can compare to me in terms of understanding time. After saying that, Zhong Ling waved her hand and said calmly, Since the future cannot be controlled, then go back to the past. Time was irreversible. Even Yang Tian could use talisman arrays to speed up the passage of time. Of course, that was only in a small area. Turning back time, even if it was within a small area, was very difficult. However, the power of time reversal was very terrifying. Just imagine if a powerful cultivator was affected by the time reversal energy, their strength, combat experience, memories, and so on would all be reversed. If time was reversed very quickly, it could turn a powerful cultivator back into a weak one in an instant. Zhong Ling waved her hand and caused the time around Yang Tian to reverse quickly. Zhong Ling laughed happily when she saw Yang Tian's figure being surrounded by time energy and fluctuating continuously. In order to obtain such great power, she had paid an unimaginable price. She looked young, but that was only her appearance. In order to obtain great power, she had been cultivating in an environment where time passed quickly. The price she had to pay was that her lifespan was reaching its limit. In this world, there was always a price to pay in order to gain benefits. Zhong Ling smiled even more happily when she saw Yang Tian's figure gradually shrinking until he was the size of a baby. She then retracted the time energy that she had placed on Yang Tian. As soon as the time energy was retracted, Zhong Ling almost had a mental breakdown when she saw what was happening. That was because Yang Tian was standing there, perfectly fine. He was wearing the giant god armor and holding the blue greatsword. He even shrugged at Zhong Ling to express his helplessness. Zhong Ling was so shocked that she could not speak when she saw that Yang Tian was not affected at all. Yang Tian smiled and said, I told you that time cannot be reversed. Impossible. Zhongling finally lost her composure. She raised her head and let out a shrill roar toward the sky. It even covered the sounds of the battle between the little blue dragon and the black dragon. Whoosh! Boom! Just when Zhongling was still in a trance, she suddenly heard a whistling sound. A black shadow appeared above Zhongling and slammed a palm on Zhongling's head. Zhongling's body instantly disintegrated and disappeared. The person that came was Tingling. How could Zhongling be killed so easily? Seeing Zhongling's body turn into dust, Tingling's eyes were filled with confusion. Yang Tian looked at the little blue dragon who had the upper hand and said to Tingling with a smile, "She won't die so easily." "Hey, you have to tell me what's going on, right?" "What do you mean, what is going on?" Tingling was taken aback and asked with a frown. Yang Tian looked around and said, "This world and your family. It's simple." Tingling said, "The divine dominion was created by my family. Unfortunately, this is an incomplete world. A long time ago, no matter how powerful the living beings were, they would all die. Therefore we, the Zhaoji family, used runes to create a world without death. In the end, we succeeded and the divine dominion was born. Those who entered the divine dominion would be immortal. However, they would have to pay the price of never leaving the divine dominion." "What would happen if they left?" Yang Tian asked with a frown as he thought of Qin Fei after Tingling had finished speaking. "They would lose their divinity," Tingling said. Chapter 911. The so-called Godhead is nothing more than the comprehension of a certain power. When one reaches a certain level, the body will undergo a change. It is located between the eyebrows. And between the eyebrows is the place closest to the central nervous system. With a thought, it will appear. After Tingling finished speaking, Yang Tian was silent for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "You know a lot." Tingling's explanation was not much different from Yang Tian's guess. "What about the Star Ocean map?" Yang Tian asked again. Tingling said, "The Star Ocean map looks like a map that marks the position of the various islands in the Star Ocean. In fact, it forms a huge talisman array. If one can combine the central talisman array of the realm of the gods with it, one can reform the great world. In the ancient legends, the realm protector envoys shoulder this task. Whoever can reform the great world will gain the loyalty of that group of people and possess the strongest power in the world." "What about the universe? What's with the worlds and the bubbles?" After Tingling finished speaking, Yang Tian asked again, "You mean the 10,000 worlds in the realm of the gods?" Tingling smiled and said, "Yang Tian, you come from one of those worlds. Actually, the universe you speak of exists at the same time as the great world. The life forms in the 10,000 worlds are only low-level life forms. They cannot directly live in the great world. They can only rely on cultivation to become stronger. Only then can they break through the 10,000 worlds and live in the great world. The great world will not be destroyed. It will exist forever. And the 10,000 worlds are like a bubble. After a long time, it will explode with a bang. The life forms inside will also be destroyed." Tingling's words made Yang Tian think of raindrops. Raindrops formed in the sky and fell. This was a process. During this process, life forms appeared inside. The life forms continuously evolved and became stronger. Before the raindrops fell to the ground and shattered, if the life forms inside could break out of the range of the raindrops, they could avoid the fate of being shattered together with the raindrops. To the life forms, this was too cruel. However, this was also a necessary process. There were countless infinite worlds, and countless living beings were born within them. Among the countless living beings, only an extremely small number of individuals could escape the restraints of the infinite worlds. When Yang Tian came out from the previous universe world, it was actually a process of escaping. Tingling continued, "The God realm is the same as the islands in the Starry Sea. It was originally a part of the great world. Its uniqueness lies in the fact that it is the center of the great world's earth veins. Even if the great world is destroyed, the earth veins on this island are still functioning." They can provide sufficient energy for the central array glyphs. Now, Yang Tian understood everything. He believed that the remaining doubts in his heart would soon be answered. Roar! Suddenly, the little blue dragon let out a loud roar. Yang Tian turned his head and saw that the little blue dragon had become very large. Compared to it, the black dragon was like a little loach. After letting out a roar, the little blue dragon opened its mouth and swallowed the black dragon. Then, the little blue dragon plunged into the ground. Boom! There was another loud bang. The ground of the god realm was extremely hard, but the little blue dragon was able to create a crack in the ground. Roar! Roar! Next, 2 dragon roars came from the crack in the ground. 2 azure dragons flew out from the crack in the ground, one after the other. When he saw this, Yang Tian smiled happily, because the 2 azure dragons that appeared were the little blue dragon's parents. They had been imprisoned in the underground space by the black dragon. After the little blue dragon swallowed the black dragon, it had obtained the memories from the black dragon. Perhaps it was because they had been imprisoned for too long, but the 2 azure dragons were extremely weak. Their bodies did not have any luster. The little blue dragon shrunk its body. The 3 dragons continued to circle in the air, occasionally letting out deep roars. Yang Tian watched this quietly and did not go to disturb them, because Yang Tian was happy, and at the same time, he wanted to spend more time with the little blue dragon and its parents. Not long after, the little blue dragon's parents flew toward Yang Tian. They circled around Yang Tian and Ting Ling a few times, occasionally letting out deep roars. Ting Ling did not understand Draconic, so it looked at the 2 weak dragons curiously. On the other hand, Yang Tian's eyes were filled with warmth. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I will take good care of Xiaolong, because he is my Yang Tian's brother. In this world, no one can harm him." As soon as Yang Tian finished speaking, the 2 azure dragons gradually slowed down. After a moment, they stopped in the air. Their bodies began to slowly dissipate as if they had been weathered. Seeing this, Ting Ling cried out in shock. "What is going on?" Yang Tian sighed. "They are Xiaolong's parents. Their cultivation levels are not high. They were imprisoned by the black dragon in a talisman formation where time passed very quickly. Not only were they unable to absorb energy, but their own energy was also being absorbed by the black dragon. That was why the black dragon was swallowed by Xiaolong in one gulp." Not far away, when the little blue dragon saw its parents' bodies dissipate, tears began to flow from its eyes. It let out a deep and sad roar. Yang Tian had never seen the little blue dragon so sad. Time? That's right. Yang Tian's eyes widened. He suddenly turned around and slashed with his sword. Whoosh! The fierce sword aura cut through space and time. Wherever it passed, a passage about 10 meters long and 1 meter wide appeared. In the passage there was a sudden cry. Zhongling, who was wearing a white dress, appeared. Yang Tian's figure flashed as he pulled Zhongling out of the tunnel. At this time, the signs of life of the little blue dragon's parents had not completely disappeared. Yang Tian held Zhongling's neck and said coldly, "Reverse time. I want to revive these 2 green dragons. As long as you can do it, I will not kill you." "Ha ha ha!" Zhongling laughed, completely ignoring Yang Tian's request. Yang Tian narrowed his eyes and channeled a sliver of harmonization into Zhongling's body. Sensing that not only was the harmonization destroying her body, but was also destroying her spirit body, Zhongling's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Fear appeared on her face. Looking at Yang Tian's cold eyes, Zhongling was afraid. She thought that she could still negotiate with Yang Tian. She did not expect Yang Tian to kill her right away. However, the process of killing her would take some time, giving her a chance to change her mind. I promise you." Under the threat of death, Zhongling had no choice but to agree. Only then did Yang Tian let go of Zhongling. When Zhongling released her energy, Yang Tian said coldly, "I want 2 green dragons that can live for a long time, not just a short time." Zhongling opened her mouth. She wanted to state her conditions, but she quickly shut her mouth when she saw Yang Tian's cold eyes. Surrounded by the time force, the two green dragons' bodies stopped dissipating. The cells in their bodies regained their vitality. To fulfill Yang Tian's request, Zhongling took out dozens of top-grade beast cores from her storage bracelet and converted them into energy. Due to the reversal of time, the little blue dragon's parents had lost their memories of reuniting with the little blue dragon. They were in a deep slumber. When they sensed that their energy was not being sucked away and that there was more energy in the space around them, they instinctively began to absorb it. Only a few minutes passed outside the time domain's range. Inside, time flowed backward and forward, allowing the two green dragons to break through their realms. When Zhongling withdrew the time domain, the two living green dragons appeared. Seeing the little blue dragon's family reunited once again, Zhongling, who had become much weaker, looked at Yang Tian with hatred and helplessness. With the time force, she could make a powerhouse drop in their realm instantly. She could also create a powerhouse in a short period of time. She could be considered a true god. However, this method was useless on Yang Tian. Yang Tian smiled happily as he looked at the little blue dragon's family quietly. Not long after, the little blue dragon's parents turned into a middle-aged couple. The little blue dragon turned into a young man in green. He looked similar to Yang Tian. The little blue dragon's knot had been untied. He could turn into a human now. "Brother, thank you." The little blue dragon came to Yang Tian and hugged Yang Tian. He was extremely grateful. Yang Tian patted the little blue dragon's back and chuckled happily. After a short reunion, Yang Tian brought the sisters Zhongling and Tingling, as well as the little blue dragon's family, and flew toward the central talisman array of the god territory. When they arrived, Zhongling, who had been intimidated by Yang Tian, was very obedient. She opened the defensive formation outside the central talisman array. Chapter 9:12. Once the talisman formation opened, what appeared before Yang Tian's eyes was a space filled with colorful light. In this space, crystals of various sizes and colors floated. These crystals were arranged in a certain pattern, orbiting around a huge light ball in the middle. Zhongling moved the crystals and led the way in front. After walking for a few minutes, they finally arrived at the center of the talisman formation. In front of them was a huge light ball engraved with runes. On the periphery of the light ball, there were two intersecting and tattered rings that were slowly rotating. There were already people here, many of whom Yang Tian was familiar with. For example, Shi Chun Yu, Immeasurable Star Lord, Black Talisman Lord, and Talisman Lord. Although Talisman Lord had the appearance of a young man, Yang Tian recognized him at a glance. These people seemed to be repairing the two rings revolving around the light ball under Talisman Lord's lead. Seeing Yang Tian and the rest arrive, this group of people was stunned. Yang Tian was also stunned for a moment, then said with a smile, "Everyone, long time no see. Ha ha." The moment Yang Tian's voice fell, Talisman Lord laughed loudly, appearing extremely happy. Shi Chen Yu also smiled slightly. After Talisman Lord stopped laughing, he walked forward and grabbed Yang Tian's arm, saying very affectionately, "Yang Tian, we were just talking about you. If you come, this talisman formation will definitely be repaired in a short time." "Repair the talisman formation? Why?" Yang Tian said with a smile. Talisman Lord let go of Yang Tian and chuckled, saying, "This talisman formation has been operating for a very, very long time. The energy accumulated is already enough. As long as it is repaired, together with the star chart, a great world can be rebuilt. You're here. All the conditions are already met. For example, Zhongling's star chart, your rune program and pentagram, and the Emperor's bloodline in Shi Chen's hands." Emperor's bloodline? It was the first time Yang Tian heard of it, and a puzzled look appeared in his eyes. At this time, Shi Chen Yu was slowly walking up the stone steps of the formation platform towards Yang Tian. As he walked, he said, "A long, long time ago, when the Great World existed, the seal formations that controlled the operation of the Great World were in the hands of the Emperor. As for He Luoyang, he possessed the bloodline of the monarch. Other than him, There was also the corpse in the limitless divine palace. Once the talisman formation is fixed, it can be activated using the monarch bloodline. With that said, Shi Chun Yu and the talisman lord looked at Yang Tian with anticipation. Yang Tian smiled. He could see that in everyone's eyes, besides anticipation, there was also a trace of greed. Even Qin Fei's father, the immeasurable Star Lord, had a trace of it in his eyes. Yang Tian knew that repairing the talisman array was absolutely not a simple matter. What are the benefits? Yang Tian asked directly. Shi Chun Yu said, Yang Tian, I won't hide it from you. When the great world reassembles, it will produce a large amount of life force. By absorbing this energy, we will exist for the same time as the previous emperor's clan. As long as the great world is not destroyed, we will continue to exist. Yang Tian did not believe Shi Chun Yu's words at all. However, as soon as her voice fell, the strange program said in Yang Tian's mind, Yang Tian, I hope you can agree to them. All right. Yang Tian immediately agreed to the strange program. Without the help of the strange program, Yang Tian would not have reached his current realm. Of course, Yang Tian would satisfy such a request. Okay, Yang Tian glanced at everyone and said reluctantly, Goodbye, Yang Tian. After the strange program said this in Yang Tian's mind, it left Yang Tian's body. A large amount of rune energy particles formed a greenish-yellow smoke and entered the floating ball of light in the center of the platform. Rumble, a moment later, the platform began to shake. The colorful crystals around them suddenly surged toward the ball of light and entered it. The two broken rings that were orbiting the ball of light slowly lit up. Soon, they looked like red-hot metal rings. Ha ha! When the talisman master saw this, he laughed happily once again. Suddenly, the ball of light let out a buzzing sound and emitted a powerful space-time energy. Those standing outside the ball of light were suddenly placed in the river of time. In their eyes, scenes of what had happened in the past appeared. Among them, Yang Tian was an exception. Yang Tian, who had the harmonization force, was not affected by the space-time energy. However, there was a special kind of energy within this energy that penetrated Yang Tian's harmonization force defense and affected Yang Tian, causing Yang Tian's mind to become muddled. The powerful space-time energy quickly exceeded the range of the divine dominion and spread toward the sea of stars. In a few breaths, it filled the entire sea of stars. In the sea of stars, countless islands began to shake. Yang Tian, wake up! Suddenly, a loud shout rang in Yang Tian's ears. Yang Tian instantly woke up. What appeared in front of Yang Tian was an old man in a black robe. From the looks of it, he was about 60 years old. Grandfather! When Yang Tian saw the old man's face, he called out in surprise. The old man laughed happily and nodded. The old man in the black robe was Yang Tian's grandfather, Yang Song. Yang Song smiled, but soon frowned. He said to Yang Tian, Little Tian, quickly destroy this talisman array. You can't let the great world reassemble. Why? Yang Tian asked. Yang Song said, You've been bewitched by the spirit. Now, no energy can affect you except for the power of life and death. Because living beings die when they live, and you haven't completely jumped out of the boundary between life and death. Only the power of life and death can affect your mind. The spirit's most powerful ability is to bewitch people. Reassembling the great world seems to be gathering all the islands in the sea of stars. But in fact, it's using the power of time to reverse time in the vast sea of stars. Think about it. If time is reversed, will the living beings on those islands and the various universe worlds still exist? Yang Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Yang Song sneered. The closer they are to this talisman array, the less affected they will be. At that time, they will be fine, but countless lives will be buried with them. The more Yang Tian thought about it, the more terrified he felt. In this way, his parents, Qin Fei, and those friends would definitely not exist. Yang Tian suddenly understood. That group of people had long predicted this situation. Yang Tian originally thought that he had escaped their scheme, but in the end, he was still in the scheme. Yang Song also understood what Yang Tian was thinking now. He smiled and said, "They can use the talisman array to calculate the future, but they can't calculate what will happen after the talisman array is activated." Yang Tian gritted his teeth and asked, "How can I destroy it?" Yang Song said, "Back then, the talisman master destroyed the talisman program because the talisman program was too mechanical. No matter how strong its computing ability was, once it was integrated into this talisman array, the program would continue to execute and not listen to his orders. But now it's different. Your talisman program has human emotions, so you can make a change." "Okay, I'll try." Yang Tian nodded. The entire sea of stars was affected by time. However, because the scope was too large, the flow of time in the entire sea of stars slowed down. If Yang Tian could see the situation on the islands outside the divine domain, he would discover that the movements of the exotic beasts on the islands were like slow motion, getting slower and slower. This was like using force to turn a high-speed turntable. To make it reverse, one had to make it stop first. "Little Chi, stop!" Yang Tian called out. Little Chi was the name Yang Tian had given to the strange program. Because strange program didn't sound nice, Yang Tian had never called it that. After a while, the strange program's voice sounded, "Yang Tian, I can't stop. I've already fused with it. If I don't create a world, the entire sea of stars, all the universes, including you, will be destroyed and turned into nothingness. I don't want you to die." Then, for a moment, Yang Tian didn't know what to say. He could only look at Yang Song helplessly. Yang Song sighed and looked at the surrounding light screen in a daze. No one could have predicted this outcome. Just as Yang Tian was feeling helpless, the strange program said, "Yang Tian, actually you can change it. The order I received was to rebuild a world. It doesn't have to be a major world. However, I can't design a world." Yang Tian's eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "All right, let me do it." The strange program answered. Very quickly, a powerful suction force appeared and pulled Yang Tian forward. Yang Tian didn't resist this force. "Yang Tian, you still have the chance to regret it, because you will be destroyed again. I can't predict whether you can survive or not." The strange program reminded Yang Tian as it pulled Yang Tian into the light sphere. Yang Tian smiled and said, "If little Fei is gone, I still have my parents and friends. What's the point of living?" The strange program understood. Yang Tian's body was quickly submerged into the light sphere. At this time in the sea of stars had completely stopped. Under normal circumstances, after a short pause, time would start to flow in reverse. However, it didn't, except for the divine realm. In the divine realm, countless so-called divinities were shouting excitedly. They thought that the world they were looking forward to was about to reappear. At that time, the entire major world would be ruled by them, and they would become true divinities. But before they could celebrate for long, countless Yang Tians appeared and raised their butcher's knives at these divinities. This was a loophole that the strange program calculated. In a short period of time, Yang Tian needed to accumulate a huge amount of energy. Only then would he be able to resist the upcoming crisis. For a moment, the entire divine realm was filled with Yang Tian's gigantic figure. Yang Tian already had the terrifying, destructive power of fusion. With the help of the strange program, no matter how powerful the divinities in the divine realm were, they wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from Yang Tian. Every time he killed a divinity, Yang Tian would open his mouth and suck, turning the divinity's corpse into a dried corpse. The more divinities he killed, the more powerful Yang Tian became. In less than half an hour, more than half of the divinities in the divine realm had been killed by Yang Tian. The strange program couldn't hold on any longer. Yang Tian, who had slaughtered divinities, once again returned to the light sphere. Not long after, time in the entire sea of stars started to flow again. There was no longer any reverse flow. As for the divine domain, it suddenly shattered and turned into a huge, colorful ball of light that grew bigger and bigger. The colorful light sphere was filled with planets, stars, and planets. Among them, The most eye-catching ones were 12 huge black spheres. The light sphere grew rapidly and spread across the entire sea of stars. Countless islands were shrouded in it. During this process, countless spaces formed by talisman arrays were also destroyed and added to the light sphere. This included the divine tomb world that the divinities in the divine realm spoke of. The passage of time couldn't be reversed. Otherwise, something big would happen. In Earth's time, several decades later, Divine Empress, the Emperor, is missing. In a spacious and exquisite palace, a soldier in black armor ran into the palace. He glanced at the ministers and divine generals around him and spoke to a woman in a phoenix robe who was standing in the middle of the palace with her back facing him. The woman turned around. Her peerless beauty made the soldier's breathing stagnate. He quickly lowered his head. The soldier's words silenced the palace. All the ministers and divine generals looked at each other. This beautiful woman in a phoenix robe and a purple and gold crown was Qin Fei. Qin Fei sighed helplessly and said lightly, "Forget it. Let's do it according to the rules. After all, he knows everything that happens in the world." After saying that, Qin Fei waved her hand. Soon, only Qin Fei was left in the palace. A maid walked up and whispered, "Divine Empress, the Emperor should have gone to Concubine Chu's place. A while ago, he went to see Concubine Li and Concubine Sayu. Then, he went to see Concubine Rome." Before the maid could finish, Qin Fei raised her hand and interrupted the maid. She rebuked, "If I knew he was so dissolute, I wouldn't have married him." As soon as Qin Fei finished speaking, a burst of laughter sounded in the palace. Yang Tian, who was wearing a black dragon robe, suddenly appeared in front of Qin Fei. Qin Fei raised her fist and lightly punched Yang Tian. Then, she was embraced by Yang Tian. The maid at the side tactfully retreated. Yang Tian lifted Qin Fei's chin and was about to kiss her. Suddenly, a half-eaten peach fell down and almost hit Yang Tian's head. Yang Tian looked up and saw the little blue dragon on the roof beam of the palace. It was looking at him with a shocked expression. Before Yang Tian could get angry, the little blue dragon turned into a green shadow and ran away. Looking at the direction where the little blue dragon disappeared, Yang Tian laughed and said, "Xiaolong, I'll punish you. You're not allowed to get close to the female dragon for a year." The atmosphere was ruined by the little blue dragon. Yang Tian pulled the smiling Qin Fei out of the palace. Out of the palace door, what appeared in Yang Tian's eyes was a beautiful starry sky. "You're afraid of trouble. Why did you build such a world? You made me look like the Queen Mother, and you look like the Jade Emperor." Qin Fei looked at Yang Tian's face and stroked Yang Tian's hand. Yang Tian shrugged and said helplessly, "I read too many fairy tales when I was young. At that time was tight, so I could only build such a world. Actually, there's nothing bad about such a world." Right after a while, let's go to Samsara to play. I'll be the emperor in distress, and you'll be the empress who was born in a village. Qin Fei smiled and said, "That's great. However, you're not allowed to bring them along. In Samsara, you can only have me." "Okay," Yang Tian agreed very straightforwardly. "But," Qin Fei said worriedly, "if we leave for a while, will this world become chaotic?" Yang Tian smiled and said, "Don't worry. With Shaoqi here, this world won't become chaotic. If anyone dares to mess around, I'll beat them into the 12 levels of hell." End of book. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.